Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health. And really, without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
Well, then quit fucking being blind. Well, come here, let me show you. Are we on? Have we been on this whole time? Oh, there's no way that's the stab. That ain't going to be the stab. No, the whole other thing. That ain't going to be the stab. Yeah. Wow. All right. Welcome to episode 21 of Nerdery and Murdery.
21.
Fucking hate you.
There's your stab.
This episode comes out October 24th. And
I am Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your murdery. I had mentioned this in a previous episode, and I was going to bring it up here just because I really kind of wanted to have a quick discussion of it.
Okay.
And
is this a get off my lawn segment?
No, not at all. This is, I want to talk about victim shaming because I want to make sure people do understand that we're not. And I know I've talked about this briefly, but
yeah.
I just kind of wanted to put really for us, it's like that we're sitting here watching a horror or suspense movie and we're yelling at the protagonist or the victim.
Yes.
It's real easy for us to sit here in our armchair quarterback and tell these victims to call the police. I'm not against the police at all. I'm not. No. But I do believe there's police reform that needs to happen.
Oh, yeah.
I do think at times some of these victims may believe there's no point in calling the police.
That they're not going to help.
Or they think they're not going to believe them. And this is going to be most often the case in an abuse situation. They're not. They don't think they're going to be believed. They don't think they're going to be helped. So I really. We've said it before, and I just want to say it again because we've come through several episodes of this. We talk about, if you don't want to raise a serial killer, don't beat your kids. Or when Zig has said through several of these things, call the police. We're not blaming the victims at all for that.
Most of the time when I'm saying that, I'm not talking to the victims. I'm talking to the people around them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Because it's very, very easy for us to sit here and say that. I just want to make it perfectly crystal clear to any of our listeners that we are not victim shaming.
No.
We're not blaming the victims for this at all.
No. Honestly, I don't want to say blame, but we're talking to the people on the sidelines, I think, more than anything else, or at least I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, or again, like I said, it's like watching a horror suspense movie. We're just yelling at the protagonists.
Yeah.
Just because it's
don't go in that door.
Exactly. So we are never ever against the victims.
No.
Or doing the victim shaming at all. I just wanted to make that very perfectly clear.
I'm actually kind of glad you did.
Yeah.
Because yes, we want everybody to be happy, healthy, and okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And listen to our shows.
Right. So anyway, that's all I kind of wanted to open with. I want unless you have any. I keep hitting the mic. Unless you have anything.
No.
I'd say let's go ahead and crack into the nerdery.
Into the nerdery. Okay. So today's episode 21, is about factory records.
Great. That's awesome. I have been waiting for you to cover. I cannot tell you how much I have just waited.
You have no idea.
I have no idea what factory records is.
Okay. Joy Division.
Okay. I know
New
Joy
Order.
Division. I know New Order.
Happy Mondays?
No.
Oh, okay.
Don't know Happy Mondays.
Okay.
Joy Division, New Order, I know.
Yeah.
Didn't Joy Division come out of New Order or New Order out of Joy Division?
Yes, New Order came out of Joy Division.
Okay.
I will cover some of that. Actually, New Order owned part of Factory Records. That was kind of how it went down.
So one of the things in the 80s is the supergroup. Asia was a supergroup.
Yes.
Was Joy Division a supergroup?
No. They started out as a little local post-punk band.
Okay.
Out of Manchester.
Who am I thinking of in the alternative world that was really kind of a supergroup? That had people from
Electronic.
Electronic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pet Shop Boys.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Bernard Sumner from Joy Division and New Order is also in Electronic.
Thank you. That's okay.
Factory Records, I think, also did the Electronic albums.
Okay.
Or the two of them.
I like Electronic.
And Johnny Marr from the Smiths.
Right. Okay.
So Factory Records was a Manchester-based British independent record label founded in 1978 by Tony Wilson and Alan Erasmus. Mm-hmm. After his graduation in 1971, Wilson began as a trainee news reporter for ITN before moving to Manchester in 1973, where he secured a post at Granada Television. He presented Granada's culture, music, and events program. Granada Television is like the counterpart of Thames Television. You're familiar with Thames Television?
Of course I am. Yes.
Yeah. So Granada.
You mean Thames?
Yeah. Yes. I mean Thames Television.
I don't even know how many years it was that, because as we've talked about before, I watched a lot of British comedies, and you always had Tim's at the end of it.
Thames Television.
And I thought it was Thames forever.
It's pronounced Tim's, but in your defense, that word is actually not English. It's actually, It predates English.
Sure.
So in Britain you had BBC One, BBC Two, and Channel 4. Mm-hmm. In between those, the Channel 3 was listed as like a commercial station. So the different regions had different commercial stations. So in the South, in London area, it was Thames, but up in the North around Manchester, it was Granada.
Okay.
Alan Erasmus was a British actor who worked in Granada, making television programs, but he was basically a bit player. And and he was best friends with Tony Wilson. Tony Wilson is the guy that refused to call Morrissey Morrissey. I always refer to him as Steven.
Okay, I remember that.
Yeah. But yeah, so Tony Wilson started the show called So It Goes, which was a British TV music show between 76 and 77. And it was most famous for showcasing the beginning of the British punk movement. Now, punk started in New York. Not many people know that. Like the Ramones, Talking Heads, Blondie. They all predated television. They all predated the British punk scene.
Well, why am I just finding out today that Blondie was punk?
Yeah, Blondie's first 2 albums were punk albums.
I don't...
Listen to the song Ex Offender.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never associated her with punk.
Yeah, she was. Well, okay. So a lot of people think of punk as being the raw guitar stuff. Originally, punk was just anything that they didn't play on regular radio stations.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, so a lot of it got lumped.
She became mainstream.
Yeah, she became mainstream. A lot of those bands, Talking Heads became mainstream.
Oh, of course.
They were
I wouldn't
definitely
consider them punk either. So
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Well, I think they ended up calling them new wave later on. But yeah, they were part of the original punk scene.
Okay.
But it made its way to England, and these guys in England were just captivated by the idea of anybody can go out and do this. So that's what they did. And Tony Wilson wanted to showcase that. So he went to, I mentioned this date before, where Johnny Marr met Morrissey in 1978. There was a show in this lesser free trade hall in downtown Manchester. And it was like a backroom concert where the guys that ended up forming the Buzzcocks put on a show for the Sex Pistols to come and play.
Okay.
And there were like 50 people in the audience. Of those 50 people that were in the audience, all but one of them went into the music business.
Wow.
Tim the postman. He's the only one who didn't, and he was a postman in Manchester.
They call me
Tim the postman. So no, I'm sorry, it was Pat the postman.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where they got the kid show.
Now I'm a little depressed because I was wanting it to be Tim.
Tim. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. So So It Goes. Tony Wilson and Alan Erasmus and Tony Wilson's wife went to that show, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is a cultural movement, and we have to get this out to the masses." So he started showcasing these bands. Now he only did, like 40 of these episodes, between the 2 years he did this. So he only got 40 bands on. Mm-hmm. But his contention was the bands he didn't put on were the ones that didn't go anywhere, and the ones that he only grabbed the ones that were important. Mm-hmm. And Tony Wilson was a little bit full of himself, but he also believed that Manchester, or the north of England, did not get its due for its cultural effect that it had on the rest of England. Like everybody was London, London, London. He's like, no. Manchester is every bit as good as London. As a matter of fact, he thought it was more soulful and better. So that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to showcase Manchester. So
where's Manchester in relationship to London?
It's north. Manchester is across the Mersey River and estuary from Liverpool. And in between them is a peninsula called the Wirral Peninsula.
Okay. So
I'm
north.
Surprised I know that. Yes, north. Northeast. Okay. Because London's in the southwest. London is almost on the coast.
Okay.
Yeah. So he decided to start this thing, this club. He rented out a club one night a week to showcase this music. And their idea was everywhere in that town, because it was an industrial town, there were signs that said factory closing. And Alan Erasmus was like, why don't we call our thing The Factory? And that way we can have a sign that says The Factory Opening. And it was used in May of 1978, the first factory night, May 26, and it became legendary in Manchester. They used the place called the Russell Club, which was a run-down hole of a club. Mm-hmm. But they featured a bunch of little local acts, the Doherty Column, Warsaw ended up changing their name to Joy Division.
Okay.
Cabaret Voltaire, you may have heard of them.
No.
Cabaret Voltaire, no. And John Dowie was a comedian, and they released all these on this little album called The Factory Sample. Now for the Factory first night, they got this artist named Peter Saville to do a promo for it, and there were workmen doing some work around where he is, and there was basically a picture of this guy with his hands in his ears and closing his eyes with a hard hat on that said "Wear hearing protection." That is the thing he used for the opening of this club, and it's kind of famous. Peter Saville ended up becoming one of the owners of Factory Records because they're like, you need to do the album artwork for everything we do. And then they released that sample, which also had that "Wear hearing protection" on sign on it.
Was New Order with Factory Records their whole?
Yeah, we'll get into that. Up until they owned it.
So the reason I asked that, so you're talking about the artwork for all of their stuff.
Yes.
So here's where my thought goes to Substance. Substance was nothing but a white album.
Yeah, that was designed by Peter Saville.
It's just white. It's just white with words on it. Actually, I think there's maybe one little tiny thing on it.
Yeah. And then like the one before that, Power, Corruption, and Lies, it had a strip of different colored bars on the side, which is what printers use to determine what color they're using, and a bowl of dying flowers on the front in the colors that are in that color bar. And then Low Life was just a picture of the drummer that just said Low Life.
You know, and I guess that just shows how not artsy I am. I don't understand how just a white album cover is art. But at the same time, when I think of Substance, that's all I see is that album. So
exactly. And they did a Joy Division Substance right after that, where they cataloged all the Joy Division stuff, because a lot of the Joy Division released 2 albums. They only released 2 albums. But they released a whole bunch of other singles, so they eventually collected those all down to Joy Division Substance. It is the same album color, it's the same album facing, except it's in green.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, so Peter Saville became, part of the group. The Factory label, because they did that sampler, they set it up in Alan Erasmus's house on the first floor of 86 Palatine Road in Manchester. They released that Factory sample in 1979, and they did a single for A Certain Ratio, which was another band. Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, OMD. Their first single was actually a Factory Records. They went on to another major label after that. I think it was Virgin. But the first Factory LP was Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures.
Okay.
And Unknown Pleasures, on the front of the album cover, it's a small picture, and it's basically like almost like a sound recording. It is the sound recording of a star exploding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there's nothing else on that album cover. On the front of the album cover, there's no printing. It's in the middle of the album. There's that picture, which is about 2 inches across. And that's it.
That's
you turn it over on the back and just got all the information on it. But yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, I love that one. In January 1980, The Return of the Doriddy column was released, along with a series of guitar releases by guitarist Vinnie Riley. In May, the singer for Joy Division, Ian Curtis, committed suicide shortly before a planned tour of the USA. The following month saw Joy Division's single Love Will Tear Us Apart released. So their biggest song wasn't released until after the singer had died. And it went up to the UK top 20, not the indie chart, the top 20.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the drummer of Joy Division, he said he didn't really care for Unknown Pleasures because he was like, it doesn't sound like us. I mean, it's a little different. But what he realized was Martin Hannett, the guy that they'd got to produce it, who ended up becoming a partner in Factory Records and the Hacienda later on. had future-proofed it. Like you can listen to Unknown Pleasures. It does not sound like it was released in 1980. It sounds like it was released last year. But I get why everybody's not up on Joy Division. Joy Division it's like some of that stuff by Jesus Mary Chain with the wild screeching guitars. Right. It does get a little crazy.
I'm not really up on Joy Division. I know a few things.
Yeah, Level Tear Us Apart is a great song.
Yeah, I
don't care who
song.
you are. That's a good song.
Yeah, I know a few things of Joy Division. I don't know a whole lot of theirs.
So they released Joy Division's second album, Closer, which had Love Will Tear Us Apart, and Don't Walk Away, which is basically the swan song.
Don't Walk Away to me is an ELO song.
Yeah, right on. Okay.
From Xanadu.
Xanadu. Wow. Well, it would have been the same time period, so yeah.
And I love that song. It's a beautiful song. ELOs.
ELOs.
Yeah.
It's all right.
The movie.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Xanadu.
Yeah, the movie Xanadu. Wow. So Factory actually opened another record store in Europe called Factory Benelux, and it was run as an independent label in conjunction with Le Disque du Crépuscule, because it's Belgium, so it's Frenchy German.
Frenchy German.
Frenchy German.
I know I didn't understand it. So sure.
In 1981, Factory and New Order opened a nightclub where they made converted a Victorian textile factory near the center of town that had last seen service as a motorboat showroom. It was at that point that Martin Hannett said, no, we spent all this money to open up a club. No, I quit. I'm leaving. The next time Martin Hannett met Tony Wilson, he tried to shoot him. Matter of fact, he put a hole in his own door.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Martin Hannett was nuts. But yeah, he was also this genius who could hear things like, and he was horrible to the musicians because no, don't drum like that. People have been drumming like that for 10,000 years. I need you to do it differently. In the movie, he was played by Andy Serkis, who was just, man, he had a ball with Martin Hannett.
What movie? I'm sorry. Did I miss that somewhere?
24-Hour Party People, which
you.
is the movie about this period.
Thank you.
Which is the one with Tony Wilson will look at the camera.
I think you thought you mentioned that, but
I did, but I mentioned it in the Smiths episode, so it was a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I occasionally black out
Yes.
when we record these, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
So yeah, he also was getting unpaid royalties, and so he settled out of court with the rest of the company. Peter Saville did the same thing, but Peter Saville continued to do the albums for him. So, but he was like, no, I'm not taking my cut. You're going to pay me for my artwork. It was at this point that New Order released their first big single. They'd done an album and a couple other singles, which was Blue Monday.
It's a great song.
Yeah, Blue Monday. The only problem was the album, the 12-inch single, which was the biggest selling 12-inch single of all time. Every single one of those singles, they lost money on.
Why?
Because they couldn't figure out. So it's two sleeves in one. So you've got the sleeve of the record, and then there's another little sleeve that fits over it. That little sleeve looked like a floppy disk, but it had cutouts where you could see the bottom part of the record. The problem is those two little holes that it had in it had to be hand cut.
Oh my God.
So they sold 1 million copies. But on every one, they lost the equivalent of 25 cents.
How long after this is True Faith?
6 years, maybe.
Okay. And I don't know if I'm thinking about True Faith or Bizarre Love Triangle.
They were on the same album.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to think of, what I'm correlating here, and I'm sorry, I've been processing as you've been talking. So the building that they bought that was kind of an old boat factory kind of thing.
That they turned into a club.
Yes, that they turned into a club. My first exposure to New Order was the video. The really weird.
That was shot in the hacienda.
in that building.
Yes.
That's what I was wondering.
That is the hacienda.
Because it is kind of very industrial. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the sound is terrible in there, too, from what I understand.
The video was great.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that place looks awesome.
Is that True Faith or Bizarre Love Triangle with the bouncy people with all the...
True Faith.
True Faith. Okay. Yeah. And so sorry. I was correlating that building to that video. And,
yes, you are correct.
Okay.
So every single thing that Factory Records did, they gave a label number to. So the Hacienda Club is FAC 21, FAC 21, or 51, sorry, FAC 51. Everything they did had a FAC number on it. The cat that lived in the office was like FAC 341. Because they named everything FAC this. That was the cat's name, FAC 341. Although successful in terms of attendance, the Hacienda lost money every night it was open.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, every night it was open. And someone even said Tony Wilson never did anything to make money. Tony Wilson did everything as an artistic expression. So here's the thing. In an interview with the bass player from Joy Division and New Order, Peter Hook, or Hooky as he is called, they were selling millions of albums worldwide, and he was having to work in the Hacienda to make rent.
Wow.
Yeah. So because all of their money was going back into the Hacienda,
right,
including... And they were like, hey, if you guys pay this to help keep up the Hacienda, we won't lose all this other money. All that other money that they were talking about were their unpaid royalties.
Wow.
But because New Order was co-owner of the record company, they were able to do that without getting into financial trouble or legal trouble.
Right.
A lot of people praise the Hacienda, and that's basically where Manchester started, was inside the Hacienda. Now, they eventually started making money until the advent of ecstasy. People would go to the Hacienda, pay their $10 cover charge or whatever it was, and not go to the bar and drink drinks. They would go and get like water or Cokes or stuff, and they would take ecstasy, which somebody else was selling. The Hacienda, toward the end, didn't make any money because all of their... They didn't have any liquor sales.
Sounded like they were never making money.
Again, none of this was for... As a matter of fact, when they originally wrote up the contract for Factory Records, it was written on a napkin in Tony Wilson's blood. And the point he makes, and you know, I hate to curse, but you had the right to fuck off, which is what was actually on the contract.
I don't know why you hate to curse. I fucking curse all the time.
Yeah, the right to fuck off. So basically, the musicians owned all their back recordings. They owned all of their publishing. All they did was split the costs on the recording and whatever, and they split the money down the middle, 50-50 on all the sales.
I just have to know why William was shocked when we swore just now.
The right to fuck off.
It's not like we've never sworn in an episode before. Plus, you know, I put that little checkbox for explicit material every fucking time I upload an episode. So I have offended his tender heart. Whatever.
Him?
Whatever.
Dum 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 dum. Brownie fudge sundae with caramel. Dum 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 dum. Extra nuts. That got him. Circling back, as we do, 1985 saw the first release of the Happy Mondays. And New Order and Happy Mondays became the most successful bands on the labels.
Why don't I know the Happy Mondays?
You probably do. They did a lot of dance music, but a lot of it is also really just kind of out there.
Yeah.
The Happy Mondays are basically the reason that Factory Records folded.
Okay.
It was a cultural hub for the emergence of techno and acid house, or the Manchester scene. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the late 80s, I started getting into acid house.
Then you know the Happy Mondays. You probably just don't know who it is.
Probably.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to look them up because Lords of Acid, I was really big on.
Step on It.
Belgium club rock was huge for me.
Yeah, check out Step on It. I guarantee you know that song.
Okay. I'll check out the Happy Mondays because if they were part of that,
yes,
I'm
they
most
are.
likely
They were huge in that. Them, the Stone Roses, Messiah.
Is it Messiah? Is that the name of the group?
Front 242.
Oh yeah, I know them.
Yeah. Trying to think of somebody else. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of those guys. In 1989, the label extended its reach to fringe punk folk outfit To Hell with Burgundy. Factory also opened a separate bar to the side of the Hacienda, which actually made quite a bit of money because people came in there to have drinks as opposed to drop acid and dance all night. Factory's headquarters, Fac 251 on Charles Street near the Oxford Road in the BBC building, was opened in September of 1990. Prior to which the company was still registered at Alan Erasmus's apartment. So yeah, like for 10 or 12 years. Yeah. But honestly, they were running everything out of the offices of Hacienda. So, but yeah, they officially opened up a different section, which I think was like right around the corner, but it was the old BBC building in Manchester. In 1991, Factory suffered two tragedies. Martin Hannett and Dave Rowbotham. Martin Hannett, again, the producer who produced a lot of the stuff, he passed away, I think mostly due to drugs and overeating and excessive lifestyle and, which a lot of those people had problems with that. And he did do some work with Happy Mondays, and they did a compilation album, and a festival was organized. So at this point, Sean Ryder of the Happy Mondays, he developed a bit of a heroin problem. So they made a couple of albums with Factory, and a New Order had gone on to Ibiza to record Revenge. But they spent like a year in Ibiza and spent millions of pounds because they could actually go on the record company's dime, which was actually their dime,
right?
And live kind of high on the hog for about a year in Ibiza because
people will in Ibiza.
Yeah. Well, so the Happy Mondays, they decided to have them record their album in Barbados because there was no heroin in Barbados. It isn't there. It's an island. They can keep it out. And besides, that's not what the Barbadans do. They're more into crack and cocaine. So
Barbadans?
Yeah, Barbadans.
Okay.
Is that right?
I don't know.
Barbadosans?
I don't know.
Their fourth album, Yes Please, is what it was. So on recording, they spent 400,000 pounds recording it, and there was nothing. It was just basically them farting into microphones.
What?
Yeah, because they were smoking crack. Because
God.
On the way, Sean Ryder had brought enough methadone to get him through, which was cleared through customs, except they were in glass vials, and he dropped them and broke them. So to ease his cravings, they got him to start smoking crack. Well, the studio that they were in.
I'm sorry. All I can see is Jack Black in Tropic Thunder. That's all I can see right now.
I am relatively certain that dude was patterned after Sean Ryder.
You know what I'm talking about.
Dude, the interviews with Sean Ryder, he still looks like he's smoking crack.
Oh my God. Okay.
And it's like, dude, and as funny as that dude is, I kind of hate that dude because I know what he did to all of these people. I mean, the manager of New Order threatened to kill him on more than one occasion. Wow. He was a volatile individual. and oh my God, of course, these guys are all Northern toughs, Every single one of them is working class, Northern England, hardcore, that's just what they are.
Right.
And again, so they spent all this money, and then they stole all the recording equipment out of the studio and sold it to buy more crack. So Tony Wilson gets a phone call from the guy that owns the recording studio. Not only that, they stole all his furniture.
There was a restaurant in Fort Worth, and for the life of me, I cannot remember their name, but you'll know the restaurant I'm talking about. It's where Razoo's now stands on Bryan Irvin Road, or used to stand.
Yes.
There was a restaurant there, restaurant bar before that.
Yes.
And I remember we were in the restaurant business back then, restaurant bar business, and everybody heard the tale of the employees showed up on a Saturday to be told, we're no longer open. You no longer have jobs.
Yeah.
And all the employees then stole everything. Outside, all the liquor, all the machines.
The furniture.
Everything.
Yeah, stripped it. Stripped it to
the name of that place? Was it Sam's?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Sam's.
I think it was like, Sam's Oyster Bar or something like that.
Because I think it was a Cajun place, kind of like Razoo's. But the employees showed up and were informed they no longer had jobs.
Yeah.
On a Saturday.
Yeah. So they stripped it to the studs.
Oh
man.
God, yes. Oh, I mean, and that was a
dude. They had little plastic coverings for the outside windows for the patio. They took those.
Yeah, I mean, it was
the ice trays out the freezer.
It was legendary across the restaurant server bartender world when that happened. Everybody heard the tale.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, basically, that's what the Happy Mondays did to this recording studio. Okay. So Factory Records had to pay for all of that. And then when they got back, they had to re-record the album because they got nothing.
Wow.
The album ended up becoming really successful. New Order's Revenge ended up becoming really successful. But at that point, Factory Records couldn't do anything. They couldn't run anything anymore. They didn't have enough money to produce the records. Mm-hmm. So they called in London Records to come in and kind of help them out. The executives from London Records came in, sat down, and in the movie 24-Hour Party People, which is about this period, they're all talking about the $10,000 table that they're sitting at. And the guy in London Records is like, you spent $10,000 on a table and you didn't produce these albums? What? And he's like, okay, so let me see the contract. And they pointed on the wall to the bar napkin with their blood. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, wait a minute. So you're saying that Factory Records doesn't own any of the band's back catalogs, any of the things? He's like, I don't have to deal with you at all. And turned to the manager of New Order and says, I'm going to give you $100,000 a piece, you and the band, to come and work for London Records.
Wow. And
they walked out the door.
Wow.
Yeah. Somebody did the same thing for the Happy Mondays, but the Happy Mondays ended up folding because, drug addiction and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So Factory Communications Limited, formed in 1981, declared bankruptcy in November 1992, and a lot of the former acts found home at London Records.
Wow.
Yeah, and Tony Wilson was actually still working in television this whole time, working for Granada. I think he was the local host of Wheel of Fortune. In 2002, they made the film 24-Hour Party People, which I've talked about. And it's centered on the Factory Records and the Hacienda. The Hacienda closed as well. It is now luxury condos, and part of the dance floor is in the lobby. And I think half of New Order owns, little bits of the club itself. At least they got something out of the deal. Right. Often unsubstantiated anecdotes and stories surrounding them. That's what they talk about. 24-Hour Party People is like everybody's memory is slightly different, and they basically tell the story from Tony Wilson's point of view. But he will stop in the middle of the movie and go, "Okay, this is what Howard Devoto thinks." And the scene with Howard Devoto, why that's so funny, is they pan over to the janitor who's cleaning the bathroom at the time, and it's actually Howard Devoto from the Buzzcocks.
Wow.
So. Yeah, everybody is in that movie who's still alive, except for some of the guys from New Order, because they were, I think Peter Hook was in it, but they were really kind of mad about that. They were still, sure. It had been less than 10 years, and they were, still kind of mad. It was Steve Coogan played Tony Wilson. Tony Wilson, Factory Records founder, died on the 10th of August, 2007 at age 57 from complications arising from renal cancer.
Wow.
The story is, I would say it's kind of sad, but everybody had a great time. You know, unfortunately, it didn't last, but New Order fared okay. The Doherty column, A Certain Ratio, the Happy Mondays, they fared okay. I mean, you know, they still do festivals. A lot of these guys are even still friends, with the exception of the Happy Mondays and some of the guys from New Order. Bernard Sumner, not so much, but yeah, like Peter Hook kind of wants to kill Sean Ryder. So, and I don't blame him. I mean, because, you know, New Order also burned up a lot of money in Ibiza, but they were actually due. Sean Ryder was just a punk. He's a big old punk. I do not like him to this day because of that. And I'm sure that's pretty unfair, but that's basically it for Factory Records.
I enjoyed that. I heard
the story is funny.
The story is all fascinating. I really enjoyed hearing that. You know, and once again, this is one of those where I knew a lot more about at least the artists.
Yeah.
Didn't know hardly anything about the story. So no, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That was really, really good.
All of those New Order albums that you like, they were designed by the same guy, Peter Saville.
Right. And I'm going to need to go back and look at those albums too, because I really like New Order. So awesome. Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So we're going to turn to the murdery side of the house, which today is not a murder.
True crime.
You know, it's from time to time. There's not going to be an actual murder.
Yay, everybody lived.
I did get my information from Wikipedia, The Hoax Project, The Olympian, Seattle PI, ABC News, and Texas Monthly.
Okay.
The Texas Monthly article was just amazing. The way when I found this story and started reading it, I mean, I had to go and read through this story again and again and again, because it just goes all over the place, and you're going to have to stay with me on this, and you're going to have to really focus.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that are going to be thrown in here, but the way Texas Monthly told the story is exactly how I'm going to tell this story.
Okay.
Because I think it's a really good way to portray this. So this is the strange connected tale of Treva Throneberry and Brianna Stewart.
Okay.
Okay.
Treva and Brianna. Gotcha.
Treva and Brianna. Treva Joyce Throneberry was born on May 18th, 1969 in Wichita Falls, Texas.
Okay.
To Carl and Patsy Throneberry. You know, Patsy, very southern name.
Yes.
And they lived in Electra, Texas, which is near Wichita Falls.
Okay.
Electra's near.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Treva was the youngest of 5 children. Most people described her as a pretty girl. Mm-hmm. She was very thin. She had freckles across her face and light brown hair that curled just above her shoulders. The school librarian once called her a quiet type person, the kind of student who yes ma'am and no ma'am to all of her teachers. Treva played on the tennis team. She practiced with an old wooden racket on the court behind the school. And in the afternoon, she waitressed at the Whistle Stop, which was a local drive-in hamburger restaurant.
Nice.
Pretty much everybody in Electra knew Treva by sight. Electra's not a huge town by any means. People said she was never unhappy, that she never complained. She always greeted her customers with a smile, even when she had to walk out to their cars during the winter during winter northers. Because it gets cold up there.
It gets cold in Wichita Falls.
Yeah, strangely enough, being only less than 2 hours from here, it gets cold in Wichita Falls in the winter.
It's like the Midwest.
Well, we moved from Wichita Falls from Tucson in the middle of the winter.
Oh, no.
And all I had was a light jacket from Tucson. And when we showed up, it was snowing. Yeah. And it was snowing hard.
Yeah.
Had to wait for at the time, the Gibson's, which was kind of like a
department store. Yeah.
The Gibson's department store to open so I can get a jacket.
There is still one in Weatherford.
Is there really?
Yes, there is.
I haven't seen a Gibson's in forever. Oh, geez. Bella tried to jump on a chair and then fell. She okay?
She's going to sit in my lap.
Okay. Yeah, she probably needs some loving for a little while. Yeah. She's a little stressed out today. Poor little girl. I think she is. I think she's having some seizures. She does. She's getting older. So thank you for holding her. I think she needs that.
Bella's my girl. She knows it.
So yeah, gets really cold up there. During her breaks at work, people said she'd just sit at a table behind the whistle stop, and she read from her red Bible.
Okay.
But people would notice that occasionally she got a very vacant look in her eyes.
Okay.
One day at school, she drew a picture of a young girl standing under a leafless tree, her face blue, and the sun was black.
Okay.
One Sunday at the Pentecostal church, she stumbled to the front of the altar, fell on her knees, and began telling Jesus she didn't deserve to live.
Wow.
One night, her niece, Jaleisha, was staying at the Throneberry house, and Treva had shaken Jaleisha awake and whispered there was a man outside of her room with a gun, which turned out to be false.
Yeah.
But, everyone in town said teenage girls, they go through phases.
Yeah.
They get overly emotional now and then.
Yeah.
They said Treva was going to turn out just fine.
Yeah. I've had one run through my house, and I've got another one in my house now.
Sure. Well, Treva wasn't like some of the other girls in town. She didn't drink. She didn't smoke cigarettes. Mm-hmm. She was just a standard teenage girl. In December of 1985, 16-year-old Treva stopped working at the whistle stop, and she stopped coming to school. A former classmate said, quote, "She disappeared and nobody knew where she went."
Wow.
That was December of 85. So now we're going to leap forward to 1997.
Wow, that's a big leap.
Uh-huh. Well, we're gonna switch now. We're gonna switch the story. Like I said, prepare for this to go back and forth.
Okay.
We're gonna go to 1997 in Vancouver, Washington.
Okay.
And
that's right on the border, isn't it?
You know what? I didn't look. I need to start looking these up more.
I think so. I think yeah, like
Maybe.
Vancouver County is like right next to Vancouver, Canada.
Could be.
Yeah.
So at Evergreen High School, a new girl arrived at the school. She was wearing loose bib overalls, a t-shirt, tennis shoes, and her hair was braided in pigtails.
Okay.
She was said to have been fuller figured than most of the teenage girls. She was wide-hipped, but she had an appealing, slightly lopsided smile and a childlike voice with a southern drawl.
Okay.
She was carrying a graphite tennis racket and a Bible.
Okay.
She told school officials her name was Brianna Stewart.
Okay.
She was 16 years old and had been living in Portland, Oregon. So no, it must not be, because here we go. She was living in Portland, Oregon, which is just across the Columbia River from Vancouver.
Okay, so
it's further south.
It's further south. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Glad I had that. She'd been living there for about a year, walking the streets and sleeping in youth shelters at night.
Okay.
She began attending church services at Glad Tidings Church, where she met a young couple who took her in after hearing her testimony.
Okay.
The couple brought Brianna to school the next day and said she was full of potential, determined to succeed, and she just needed a chance to get over her past.
Right on.
Greg Merrill was one of the school counselors, and he asked Brianna about her past. Brianna told Greg that she had been raised just outside of Mobile, Alabama, by her mother and her Navajo stepfather, who was a sheriff's deputy. She said her mother had been murdered when she was a child, leaving her with her stepfather.
Oh, wow.
At 13, she ran away hitchhiking from state to state, slowly making her way northwest, because she remembered her mother telling her father lived somewhere in the northwest.
Okay.
And all she wanted to do was find the clues about her past.
Okay.
Greg, the counselor, he asked about her education, and she said she had been homeschooled, but she promised, I'll be a good student. Just give me a chance. I'll be a good student. She said, quote, "I've never lived a normal life. That's all I want, to be a normal teenager like everyone else." So Brianna was then enrolled in the 10th grade at the high school that had 1,900 students. Mm-hmm. Her first class was Algebra 1, and she was given a seat in the back. She pulled out a notebook and began listening intently to the teacher, and then she glanced over at the boy sitting next to her. It was a boy named Ken Dunn, and Ken looked at her and said, "Hi," and couldn't stop smiling at Brianna, and she giggled very shyly, and she said, "Hi, I'm Brianna. I'm new here." Very cute.
Nice.
So now we're going to go back to 1985 to Electro, Texas.
Okay.
And rumors began spreading around the town that Treva had last been seen at the police station.
Okay.
Treva told police that her daddy, holding a gun in his hand, had raped her. She added that her mother only laughed when she found out what happened. Police immediately called child welfare, who came and took Treva away, while a judge issued an emergency protective order preventing Treva's parents from seeing their daughter or even finding out where she was.
Okay.
Carl and his wife Patsy, they were good people. They were known as good people. They lived in a very small frame house.
Yep.
Carl was a big lumbering man. He worked in the oil fields as a truck driver.
Yeah.
He and Patsy met at a soda fountain in Oklahoma in the 1950s, and they were married a few weeks later. I thought this was kind of neat. It was very cute. They actually went to the A&P supermarket in Wichita Falls, where the butcher, who was an ordained minister, performed the wedding ceremony in the parking lot.
In the parking lot of the A&P.
Yep. As Carl and Patsy sat holding hands in the back seat of his Chevy.
Nice.
So I thought that was very sweet. Carl admitted that he sometimes had trouble making ends meet, but he always made sure that his 5 children were well fed and dressed properly for school. I've known a lot of people like this.
Yeah.
My
salt of the earth.
Yes. So my Mima, she was adopted, and she really took care of her siblings her whole life. And when she and my peepaw were married, Mima made sure he had a suit to go to church. She made sure that the family always had, and they really, they worked everything from the ground up. But that, and that just reminded me of that. It's just very salt of the earth people, but made sure their family was taken care of. Carl's older brother, Billy Ray, often dropped by to give the 4 girls presents.
Right on.
As the older girl left home, Billy Ray would dote on Treva, bringing her candy bars, buying her clothes from the dollar store, taking her on drives in his car. In court, Carl and Patsy insisted Treva had made up the entire story.
Yeah.
Their attorney demanded Treva take a lie detector test, and her sisters actually gave affidavits saying they too believed their father to be innocent.
Yeah.
So Carl then claimed if there was anyone that raped Treva, it was one of those fanatical members of the Pentecostal church. He was not a fan of them.
No.
He said he knew for a fact they were trying to brainwash Treva into becoming a missionary. The church members said they were only trying to help a young girl who was obviously in great distress. They said in the weeks leading up to the rape allegation, Treva said she was scared of being at home at night and would slip out at night to sleep in an abandoned house next door on a pew at the church itself. So Treva was then taken to a foster home in Wichita Falls, and her foster mother, Sharon Gentry, she said that she often found Treva at night curled in a fetal position in the corner, often with the bedclothes taken off the bed, and she was just covered in them, but she was in a fetal position.
Okay.
One night she found Treva banging her head against a wall, murmuring in her sleep, "Please don't hurt me. I'll be a good girl."
Okay.
It's just sad.
Yeah.
Just like other people who had known Treva before, Sharon said she was very touched by Treva's gentleness. She said Treva was very soft-spoken, exceedingly polite, and she started attending Wichita Falls High School, where she had a reputation as a very diligent and thoughtful student. She regularly read the Bible and wrote teenage poetry in her notebook. I actually have one of her poems here. And it said, quote, "Raining tears flowing down my face, yours forever, a lost case. No one cares or sees you fall. No one hears you when you call."
Wow.
Kind of sad.
Yeah.
But
bad, though.
No, it wasn't bad. As the weeks went on, Treva began leaving very disturbing handwritten notes on the ironing board for Sharon. One such note read, "Sometimes I wish I were dead. Sometimes I don't. Life seems impossible and death seems eternal. I will have no life after death." Pretty dark.
Yeah.
One morning, Treva told Sharon she'd been dreaming about shooting herself. She said in the dream she could see the bullet entering her head. And then she later told a story where she had been kidnapped in Electra and been blindfolded by members of a satanic cult to an abandoned oil field where she had been tied to a stake. She said people in black robes danced around her and then slit the throat of black cats and forced her to drink their blood. So.
Okay, so this is about what, like 86?
No, we're in 95. Where were we?
We were at 85.
Yeah, 85.
When she left home.
Yes.
So we're like 86, 87, somewhere around in there?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm with you. I'm just trying to follow this progression logically.
Nope, you're good. Because now we're to May of 86, and Treva told a counselor that she was thinking about jumping off the building to kill herself.
Okay.
Police were immediately called, who sped to the school. I hate this. Police were called, who sped to the school, handcuffed her, and took her to the Wichita Falls State Hospital at the edge of the city.
They took her to Wichita Falls.
It's the state hospital.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know about the rest of Texas, but my family lore was always, hey, you'd act right, they're going to end up sending you to Wichita Falls, which was the horrible place to go.
Oh, yeah. I did some of my growing up in Wichita Falls.
Yeah.
I know exactly where the sign is that said Wichita Falls State Hospital and point with the arrow. It always creeped me out. It always
It's
creeped me out.
a horrible place to be, from what I understand.
But it's not only that they took her there, but I mean, really handcuff her and then take her?
Yeah, not for killing someone else, for killing herself.
For claiming she wanted to.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
This is a 16, possibly 17-year-old girl at this point.
Right.
Okay.
At the hospital, she would often spend long periods by herself, just staring out the window and very often crying.
Yeah.
They said that she rarely ate. Her face was very blank. Her cheeks were sunken. She was given various tests, including the Woodcock-Johnson psychoeducational battery. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about this. This measures cognitive ability and academic achievement in children, young people, or adults. The test it tests the cognitive ability to produce a full-scale intelligence score and determine strengths and weaknesses of information processing.
This is the Woodcock test? I think I've heard of this before.
Yeah, I'd never heard it. They put her on meds. Mm-hmm. Xanax for anxiety, Trilofan to combat thought disorders, and Tofranil, an antidepressant.
Wow.
She was in a nice little cocktail.
Yes, she was.
They also put her in a weekly group therapy session where she and other children sat in a circle and talked, but she just never said anything. Mm-hmm. She did write a few sad letters to Sharon Gentry and a boy from Wichita Falls High School who had once taken her on a date to Six Flags. So those of you who are not familiar with the distance between Wichita Falls and Arlington, Texas, it is not down the street.
No.
In 96, yeah.
86.
Or excuse me, in 86, the speed limit was still 55 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And it was a 2.5-hour trip from Wichita Falls to Arlington, Texas.
Yes.
That's a hell of a date. I just had to throw it out.
That's 5 hours on the road. That's not spending any time at the park. And if you want to go to the park in the 1980s, you're going to stand in line.
I know.
Depending on what day you went. Now, Wednesdays was always best.
Well, I mean...
we just went last week. That was the other thing I meant to tell you.
To Six Flags?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Took the girls. Yeah. Jerry came up, so we all went.
I haven't been in so long. I remember I once took a date from Fort Worth to Dallas once.
Yeah.
And that was only an hour trip. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I just thought a date to Six Flags. Wow.
From Wichita Falls.
Right.
That's an all-day date, too.
Yeah, that's interesting. But anyway, in the letter to the boy she wrote, I feel like a living robot. I walk when they say walk. I sit when they say sit. I do everything they say because I have to. I can't take it anymore. I have to die. Doctors were baffled by her, and they just put on reports that Treva has a characterological disorder, and that she's kind of quiet and secretive, and she may have a personality problem. So the more we go through this, and I really kind of want to talk about it at the end. I don't want to get overly political and everything.
Yeah.
But just kind of the biggest thing that I come to as I talk more and more about this is just the absolute shit state of mental health we are in this country.
Yes.
This is such a big clue of this. But anyway, I want to talk about it at the end.
I'm with you. I think Will is with you as well. Yeah, he's nodding.
I don't know. They tried to get a better clue of what happened to Treva, so they arranged for her to meet with her parents. Her parents had actually been coming to the hospital and demanding to see her.
Yeah.
The DA's office had dismissed the sexual charges against Carl, saying there was no evidence to prosecute.
Yeah.
Treva sat there with her parents in the presence of a social worker and a therapist. Her parents told her she had to admit that she had been lying about the rape.
Yeah.
Treva stood up, called them liars, and said they didn't love her. And then she said she had nothing more to say and wished to return to her room.
Wow.
So, back in Vancouver, 1997, we're going to go back to Brianna, who was just happy to have a chance at Evergreen High School.
Is this the same person?
Well, I think you figured that out.
Yeah.
So we'll get there.
Okay, right on. Sorry, I didn't mean to give anything away.
No, and as I went through here, I really kind of wondered how long it would take before you figured out this was the same person.
About 5 minutes ago, but I didn't want to say anything.
Okay, yeah, because we'll get to there. Yeah. So Brianna Stewart, she was just happy to have her chance at Evergreen. Each morning she rode the city bus to school.
Right on.
She had a backpack crammed full of textbooks and her Bible. She had trouble with algebra. Who doesn't? Mm-hmm. But she shone in English. She was able to quote Macbeth from memory, and for extra credit, she wrote poems and stories, including one about a little girl who had imaginary friends as playmates.
Sorry, I'm knocking on the table for Macbeth.
Oh.
Ex-actor. Sorry.
Yep. Thank you. Got it. She still came to school every day in the same outfit, overall t-shirts, tennis shoes, and pigtails. And one day she asked to go to the mall with a group of girls. They cranked up the stereo in the car, and all the girls danced along while Brianna moved in jerky, non-rhythmic motions as if she had never heard that kind of music in her life. This is when I started realizing that
she was listening to 1997 music.
Right.
And she was used to 1985 or 86 music.
To most of Evergreen, she was just the classic teenage wallflower. Ken Dunn thought she was unlike anyone he had ever known.
Right on.
He told his friends, "I like the way she walks. I really like the way she talks." He began imitating her way of writing numbers, walking her from class to class. He would sit and watch all of her tennis practices and smile encouraging, despite the fact that she was the worst player on the team.
Right on. Didn't matter. She was his girl.
And he would spend much of his time helping her with the lines for his drama class, even though Brianna was not really good. Yeah, she was his girl. Let's think about this a minute, though. She's in her 20s.
Yeah, she's
I think 26.
Yeah, dude, that'd be right. 26, and he's 16.
16 years old.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, keep that in mind as we go through this now.
Yeah, okay.
Soon, Ken and Brianna began swapping flirty notes and going on dates in his 1978 El Camino, which was known around the school as the Turd Tank.
The Turd Tank.
Ken would take her shopping. He took her to bargain stores, to the roller rink, and to the mall where they sat and talked. Ken would also go to church with her, where she often gave her testimony. And he was so amazed at the amount of scripture she knew, he told his parents once that she must have studied the Bible for years.
Yeah. In Wichita Falls State Hospital.
Well, one day at the food court, Brianna opened up about her past, and she said she watched her stepfather stab her mother to death and carry the body away. Mm-hmm. He then made tapes of himself and his friends raping her, which he sold on the black market. She said she became pregnant at 11 or 12, and he pushed her down a flight of stairs, which forced her to miscarry. And she went to the police to turn him in, but no one believed her. They called her stepfather to come pick her up, which is why she knew she had to run away. And then she said there was one more thing, with her voice softer than ever. Just before coming to Evergreen, she had gotten to know a security guard in downtown Vancouver. One day, while the two of them were sitting in his car, he forced her to have intercourse. And she said, "He raped me, he raped me, he raped me." She repeated it over and over with tears streaming down her face. And then she said, "I wanted to kill myself. I began thinking about standing on an overpass and jumping off." Later on, Ken would say, quote, "Here was this beautiful girl who had been forced to endure unimaginable atrocities, and yet here she was at Evergreen wanting to make something of herself in life. I wanted to help. I wanted to make her happy. I wanted her to know that someone cared for her."
Small town, Washington State.
He took her to the school's Sadie Hawkins dance. They dressed in matching coveralls, told each other they loved each other, and shared their first kiss. Ken later said, "I was 16, she was 16. It was the perfect teenage romance. I couldn't imagine anything could go wrong." Back to 1986, and Treva has spent 5 months at the state hospital. Doctors declared she was no longer suicidal or severely depressed.
Okay.
Their worry was that she was unpredictable.
Okay.
She was discharged in October 86, but nobody knew what to do with her. Treva begged social workers to not return her to her parents, which suited them just fine, her parents. Carl and Patsy didn't want her to come home until she said the rape story was a lie.
Yeah. What about the foster mom?
She doesn't come back in here until a little bit later, so I don't know. What they did do is they sent her to the Lena Pope home.
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who don't know, it's a residential treatment center for troubled teens.
Yes.
The counselors came up with a plan to improve her self-confidence and develop and maintain personal relationships by enrolling her at Arlington Heights to finish her senior year.
Arlington Heights High School, right around the corner from Lena Pope home.
Yep. In June of 1987, she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. And she was now 18. She could no longer be under state juvenile supervision, and so she was completely on her own.
Right on.
Counselors asked her what was next, and she said she planned to apply to a Bible college and said, quote, all I want is to feel normal. I want to live life, but I want it to be normal. Most of all, I want to live a normal life. Treva did return to Electra, but only to visit her sisters. She did not visit her parents. Her sister Carlene said, quote, Treva, honey, what you said about Daddy is still breaking his heart. You need to go apologize. And Treva she wouldn't respond, and she just watched the floor. Her sisters at that point knew what was bothering her. They knew the truth. They didn't need to be told. It wasn't the dad.
It was the uncle.
It was the uncle. They all knew why Treva
Why
didn't want to go home.
Why did she do the story for the dad? Did the uncle make her?
Well, okay, so let me kind of go through this a little bit, and you may kind of understand.
Okay.
They said that all of them had laid awake at night in their own beds praying he wouldn't come touch them. He was not their dad, but their older brother, Billy Ray, as we said. Billy Ray often stayed at the Throneberry house and was a heavy drinker. On the nights he stayed, he would slip out of his bed and tiptoe to where his nieces were sleeping, moving from one bed to another and molesting each one of them.
Wow.
No matter how long it lasted, they would shut their eyes, clench their teeth, and make sure to not make a sound or a whimper, because he told them to keep their mouths shut or he'd have their mom and dad killed. As they got older, they basically had been trained never to talk about it.
Okay.
All three girls married as teenagers so they could leave home and live in their own
Get away
homes,
from that dude.
away from Billy Ray.
Yeah.
Which left Treva alone and allowed Billy Ray to become an even greater predator to just her.
Just her. Okay. And she was the youngest.
When Treva reached 16 and accused her father of rape, they assumed she had finally reached the point where she had to make her own escape like they did. And they figured that Treva knew if she said it was her father, that child welfare would come and get her and
take her out of the house. And because it wasn't true, nothing would happen to her dad. Okay.
That's what they figure.
Yeah. That tracks though. I mean, yeah. That makes sense.
Well, they assumed Treva would handle the rest of her life like they did, suffering in silence, but then Treva began telling them crazy stories, such as being kidnapped by a satanic cult.
Yeah.
A day after she arrived in Electra, Treva left. She never went to college. She lived briefly in Fort Worth with a woman who was raising 3 children, and then reportedly went to live at a YWCA. On one occasion, Treva did call Sharon Gentry, the foster mother, collect, and she said she was working at a rundown motel in Arlington. She called again and said she was living on the streets, and then she disappeared.
Okay. And this is in 88, 87, 88?
We were in 87.
Okay.
So now we're going to go back to Vancouver in 1998. Brianna Stewart had become a well-known figure at Evergreen. Most of the kids now knew the story that she told about her tormented childhood.
Yeah.
They had learned she courageously went to police to file a rape charge against the security guard who pled guilty to communicating with minor for immoral purposes. And the security guard, Charles Blankenship, lost his job and would serve 50 days in prison or in jail. Brianna said that her goal in life was to become a lawyer focusing on children's issues. She spent her free time in the library reading books about law or researching elaborate reports that she would turn into her teachers, bearing titles such as Society's Missing Youth, Child Abuse, and Adjustive Behaviors.
Wow.
For one English class, she wrote a short story called Betrayed about a girl named Jessica who had no idea where she came from, and in it the police and FBI conduct a DNA test to prove that Jessica was abducted as a child. It's very much like Brianna's own past.
Yep.
She told anyone that would listen that really what she desperately wanted was to get a Social Security number that identified her as Brianna Stewart. She said if she could get one, she could move on with her life. She could get a driver's license.
Yeah.
She could apply to college. She could get a job.
Yep.
The problem was she didn't have a birth certificate.
Right.
And until they could track down her real father, she couldn't get a Social Security number.
Okay.
What made things worse is Brianna was very hazy about much of her past.
I'll bet.
Mental health professionals in Vancouver who interviewed her believe she had suffered from amnesia or some sort of post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Okay.
There were numerous people around Vancouver who tried to help Brianna. There was a state social worker who conducted an exhaustive government record looking for any evidence of Brianna, her mother, or her stepfather. There was a staffer from Indian Health Services who scoured national databases of missing children and even asked her to give blood in the hopes of finding a DNA match. They got an FBI agent to investigate whether Brianna was the victim of an unsolved kidnapping.
Okay.
But everyone came up empty-handed.
Because they're looking for the wrong person.
Well, in January of 2000, Brianna took a bus to Daphne, Alabama, which is outside of Mobile, where she said she'd been raised. There was a police detective who spent several days driving her around from place to place, hoping to see something to
That she remembered. Yeah.
She said, she saw a swing at a park, and she said, I remember playing on that. She saw a table at McDonald's. Oh, I remember I once sat there, but there was no evidence she ever lived there.
Yeah.
Going back 1992 now, back in Electra, Texas, nothing more had been heard from Treva. Most assumed she'd been killed.
Yeah.
Carl and Patsy still had a $3,000 burial insurance policy on her.
Okay.
In 93, there was a rumor around town that Treva had died at the Branch Davidian compound fire.
Oh, yeah.
Sharon Gentry actually sent Treva's dental records down there.
Just in case.
And Treva wasn't there.
Okay.
However, in the little town of Corvallis, Oregon, there was a teenager named Kelly T. Throneberry Smith who was working at a McDonald's and staying with a family she met at church. She told people she preferred the name Kelly Smith and tried in court to legally change her name because she was hiding from her father, who lived in Dallas.
Okay.
She told police she had already been found once forced into his car and that he raped her. And police tried finding Kelly's father but could not. And eventually Kelly disappeared. Or Keeley. I'm sorry, it's Keeley.
Keeley. And this was in 93?
Yes.
Okay, so she was pretending to be a teenager in Oregon.
In 1993.
In 1993. Okay.
She resurfaced the next summer in Portland, Oregon, telling the police she was on the run from her sexually abusive father. This time she said her father was a Portland police officer. An investigation had begun, but now Keeley disappeared again. She reappeared in the summer of 94 and I have no idea how to pronounce this town, Coeur d'Alene, in Idaho, using the name Cara Leanna Davis.
Okay.
Here she said her mother had been murdered and her father, a police officer, had been a member of a satanic cult and repeatedly raped her. 2 months later, she vanished.
Wow.
In 1994, she arrived in Plano, Texas, and here her name was Cara Williams. She told police officers and social workers that she was 16 years old and had been born and raised in a satanic cult.
Okay.
She said she had been taught her destiny was to honor Satan and die in a lake of fire. She said many of the children she had grown up with had been sacrificed, being stabbed to death with daggers.
Wow.
She also said her mother had been murdered by her father, who was a cult leader and was a Colleyville police officer. She claimed he raped her repeatedly and forced her to chant prayers to Lucifer at bedtime.
Good Lord.
There was a female detective who began searching for clues about Cara's father, and she even went to the police chief in Colleyville and said, hey, do you have any officers who, I don't know, have any special interest in satanic activities? But nothing came of that.
Well, Clem likes to play D&D.
Right. Kara was taken from
It was a shot at Colleyville.
Oh, I know. Kara was taken from various foster homes and shelters around Dallas by social workers trying to find a place where Kara would feel safe. At one shelter, she accused a male staffer of sexually molesting her, so she was moved. And every time she moved, she would enter a new high school. Mm-hmm. In 1995 alone, she attended high schools in Sadler, Sherman, and Dallas, and she always joined the tennis team.
Wow.
In September of 95...
I figured she would have been a better tennis player by the time she got to 97.
One would think. Remember that comment in a while.
Yeah.
In September of 95, a staffer from the residential treatment center where Kara had been staying called Kara's social worker, Suzanne Arnold, at home. The staffer was from Electra, Texas, and she said, "Suzanne, I think Kara is actually a 26-year-old woman named Treva Throneberry." Kara was confronted a few days later with records, photographs, and handwriting samples proving she was Treva. Mm-hmm. Kara confessed to nothing and was so adamant and tearful that people thought Kara actually believed what she was saying.
Okay. That yes, it was not true, but she didn't know it was not true.
Mm-hmm. So a court actually discharged her from government supervision because she was an adult.
Okay.
Suzanne, the social worker, excuse me, handed Kara a quarter as she was leaving and gave her the number to the state's mental health office and for a homeless shelter. And she begged her to get some help. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll talk about it at the end. So anyway, Kara and Treva then disappeared again. Mm-hmm. Or Kara/Treva. In June 1996, a 16-year-old teenager named Emily Cara, it's Kharra, Cara Williams, arrived in Asheville, North Carolina, where she told police officers she was on the run from a cult in Texas.
Okay.
In 1996, in August 1996, a 16-year-old girl named Stephanie Williams arrived in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where she told police she was on the run from her father in Memphis, Tennessee, who was involved in a cult and child pornography ring.
Okay.
Here, a social worker saw a reference in Stephanie's notebook referencing Suzanne Arnold back in Texas. Mm-hmm. And, of course, phone calls and record checks proved that this was Treva Throneberry.
Yeah.
Treva was arrested for providing a false report to police, and she served 9 days in jail.
Okay.
There was a social worker from Altoona who called Carl and Patsy and asked them to speak with her daughter to remind her who she was. And Carl said on the call, "Hi, baby, it's your daddy." And Treva replied, "You know, you sound like an awful nice man, and I wish you were my father, but you're not. I'm not who you think I am." Patsy said, "Honey, you'll always be Treva Throneberry until the day you die. Now stop playing games." And Treva replied, "Oh no, you got me mixed up with someone else, but someday I may just get that way to see you." And then Treva disappeared after she was released from jail.
Right on.
Treva was on the road again, making appearances in Louisiana, New Jersey, and Ohio. She would always show up at youth shelters carrying some luggage, a teddy bear, a Bible, a flute with some sheet music, and some algebra homework. Mm-hmm. She found refuge in high school, eating cafeteria food, playing on the tennis team, studying Macbeth, and memorizing algebraic equations year after year.
Okay, so she was bad in algebra when she got to Vancouver.
Yeah.
She still wasn't any better at tennis.
No.
Okay.
No.
But she did know Macbeth.
She did know Macbeth.
Okay.
In June 2000, back in Vancouver, Brianna Stewart walked across the stage to receive her diploma from Evergreen High School.
How many times has this lady graduated?
I believe it's twice. I believe she graduates twice.
You know, there was a storyline in, what was that series with Jason Bateman? About the family, the Bluth family.
The Bluth family? Arrested Development.
Arrested Development, where maybe the sister's, his sister's daughter went back to high school and graduated like 4 years in a row when they brought the series back.
So Ken Dunn and Brianna had broken up a long time ago. They had a fight at one point, and the research I had mentioned the fight. I didn't really want to get into it too much, but basically, Ken was kind of starting to doubt her a little bit, doubt her stories. And so she just got mad and they kind of broke up. But he did approach her at a graduation party, and he told her that no one ever affected him the way she did. He told her, "You're going to do great, Brianna, and I mean it." Brianna then spent the summer volunteering for the Ralph Nader presidential program.
Okay.
Which we all know doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. But hey, it's groovy that she was a Naderite.
Right. But she spent most of her free time trying to get a Social Security number. She wrote a letter to the governor and even got 2 lawyers to help her.
Okay.
Neither attorney knew what the other was doing.
Okay.
One provided letters from school officials and school transcripts along with her state picture ID to try and get her birth certificate. The other filed a petition to the state along with her fingerprints.
Okay.
Brianna then got the news that if she appeared for a simple court hearing in March of 2001, that she would get her official papers.
Right on.
And on March 22nd, 1 week before the hearing, Vancouver police arrested Brianna on charges of theft and perjury. She was told she was a 31-year-old woman who had fraudulently received foster care and free public education from the state of Washington, and that her fingerprints matched those of a woman from Altoona, Pennsylvania, named Treva Throneberry. Right. So, here you go, is where,
At this point, she's 31.
31 years old.
And everybody thinks she's 18 or 19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ken Dunn said he nearly dropped the phone when his mother called him with the news. He said, "Mom, I went to homecoming with a woman 12 years older than me." Most people felt Treva intentionally deceived everyone. Many were fascinated that she couldn't make an A in algebra despite taking it for 15 years. I know.
No. Okay, so the thing with the algebra. But I want to say this. I don't think she was doing it on purpose.
Well,
I really don't. I think that uncle had twisted her noodle so bad that she didn't know what was real and what wasn't. I think she probably believed half her stories.
I would agree with you. I do agree with you.
Because she hasn't other than free education, she hasn't actually taken anything. Mm-hmm. She hasn't benefited from anything other than survival.
Yeah. Well, she's gotten, devil's advocate, she's gotten free home, free care, free food, clothes. People bought things for her, opened up their home, paid for stuff for her. So, there's people that did. But I agree with you. I don't know that I believe it was intentional. I think she was very mentally challenged.
Yeah, I agree.
The Clark County prosecutor, though, felt Treva needed to be treated as a common criminal.
Okay.
Most of the Vancouver citizens favored Treva getting psychiatric help versus prison.
Yeah.
Which I agree with. There was an even greater outpouring for Treva when her sisters told reporters about the sexual abuse. So they've now opened up.
Yeah, they finally talked about it.
Yep.
Treva now. Nice if they'd have talked about it 12 years earlier.
I know. But again,
I know.
I don't want to victim shame.
No,
I wasn't there. I can't talk to that.
No. Okay.
So I think you're seeing exactly why I brought up victim shame at the beginning of this.
Because you knew my reaction was like, why didn't you guys say something when this was going on?
Right. Especially,
okay, so I get if they were young and children, but they weren't children at that point. They were adults.
They were, but they were still, it still
trauma.
Obviously affected them. They were still traumatized. Yeah. Absolutely. Treva is now in jail, and she refused to admit who she was. And she said she's never heard of Treva Throneberry. She even demanded that her DNA be taken and compared to Carl and Patsy.
Yeah, there you go.
They did. The test showed a 99.93% certainty that they were her parents.
Yeah, that she was Treva Throneberry.
Mm-hmm. Treva was offered a plea bargain of 2 years in prison if she would admit who she was, which she refused.
Yeah, because that's not who she is. She probably can't admit who she is.
Right. She asked to exercise her constitutional right to defend herself in trial. She wanted to convince the jury that she was really Brianna Stewart and clear her name. And this is where the prosecutor told the press. The way I read it, I think this prosecutor was kind of a nasty jerk. I heard when I read this part, it said the prosecutor snarled at the media. But anyway, he told the press that Treva was perfectly competent to stand trial and defend herself, and he followed it with, "She's graduated from high school at least twice." So anyway,
yeah, but it still couldn't learn algebra or tennis.
No. The jury did find her guilty. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. And as she was taken away from the courtroom, she stated, "It's so unfair. My name is Brianna Stewart and I'm 19 years old. I'm not guilty of anything except being a teenager." Treva was released from the Gig Harbor, Washington Correctional Center after serving 2 years and 3 months of her sentence. In 2003, Treva was interviewed by ABC Primetime, and she's still insisting she's Brianna Stewart.
Okay.
She said, "I'm not Treva Throneberry. I just want to reiterate that I am not, no matter how much that family wants to suddenly produce their family member, no matter what they do, what they say, I am not Treva Throneberry, nor will I ever be Treva Throneberry, because you can't make another person into somebody else. You just can't."
Okay.
And the last I have of her is in 2016. She resurfaced under the name Brianna Kenzie, where she accused a local man of sexually assaulting her where she worked as a hotel employee. The man was taken into custody and for questioning, but was eventually released as this turned out to be a false claim. And then the hotel found out who she was, and they fired her, and now she's disappeared again.
She disappeared again.
So that was the last that anyone has heard from her was in 2016. And so the last point I had here, because this is really where I want to talk about it. I'm not intending to get political when I talk about this at all, but I really kind of wanted to discuss mental illness in this country, and especially from this case, because I don't know that they properly treated this woman.
I don't think they ever treated this woman properly.
No. I don't know that they knew how.
Yeah, it may be part of the problem,
right? And that's exactly what part of the problem. And that's where I said we are in severe, dire need of mental health reform in this country.
Yeah,
because
definitely in the state of Texas, because Texas, we failed this young lady. We failed her hard.
Yeah. Yeah, this is another one where somebody was failed hard. This was a troubled young woman. She remains a troubled woman, obviously.
Yeah.
She has spent the better part of her adult life homeless, going from city to city, place to place, trying to be 16 years old and happy again.
Yeah.
So whereas the story didn't really say it, what I'm imagining is that her sisters were all gone and she was the only child in the house at about 16 years old.
Yeah.
And that's when they said that the molestation, the sexual assault from her uncle intensified. And I think that what Treva has tried to do is
go back to the point before that.
Is go back to the point where she was at least somewhat happy.
Yeah.
Because she has just wanted to be 16 all over again. And that's what she did.
She's trying to heal from the trauma, and the only way her 16-year-old brain, because it sounds like she still has a 16-year-old brain,
right,
is to go back to the point before the trauma and live there.
Well, and there was the whole thing that she kind of the piece of the story she kept going back to was father raped her, mother murdered, satanic cult.
Yeah.
How much of that was Billy Ray?
Yeah.
Was Billy Ray part of a satanic cult?
Or did he tell her that?
Yeah, or did he tell her that?
Yeah.
The whole mother murdered. Remember when she told her mother that her father raped her, her mother laughed at her and didn't believe her. So her mind went to, my mother's dead.
Yeah.
Because she won't believe her own daughter.
Right on.
So I do think, I think she's kept trying to get back to that time in her life where she was still happy and okay.
Yeah. Because from all everything you said in that story, up until that point, she was.
Yes. Yeah, the entire the town commented about it.
Yeah.
Up until they started noticing that she would get very vacant
After her sisters left.
Yes, it doesn't specifically say that, but yes, I think chronologically that's when that happened.
When her noodle got twisted.
I think that's when her sisters were gone. Was about 16 years old.
Okay.
And that's when I think this all started. I feel for this woman. I absolutely feel for this woman. I do. I feel we failed her as a community. I feel
because she would be what? If she graduated high school in 1987, the first time, she'd be what, 52 now?
Well, she was born in 69.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. 52, 53, somewhere around there. Yeah.
And she's had to spend the bulk of her life
trying to get back to okay.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And so yeah.
And
so,
we actually had her. We had her in a mental facility where this could have been at least sussed out.
Granted, but as you and I said, everybody knew to fear that state hospital.
Yeah.
I never heard good things coming out of there. No. So, obviously we failed. Yeah. We failed as a society to not reform that hospital. We failed as a society for her.
I will say this. There was a substance treatment facility that was associated with that hospital up in Wichita Falls that Kevin went to, and it really helped him. But that wasn't the main hospital. Sure. It was off to the side.
Well, and they may have been reformed since. I don't know.
This would have been at that time. This would have been in like 1987.
Okay. Because I've never been in. Like I said, the closest I ever got to it was seeing the sign with the arrow pointing. Because I know the exact street. I can see it in my head. There used to be a Kmart right there, and there at the
miss Kmart,
and right there at the stoplight was the sign that said Wichita Falls State Hospital that way. Yeah, I saw it because we went to that little area where that sign was every week because where I went bowling, where I took my guitar lessons, was just down the street from that. We went to that Kmart. There was a little grill across that street, the Southwest, the Parkway Grill that was right there. I mean, I can see it clearly in my
pretty
head.
Vividly,
Yeah, I see it clearly in my head. There was an Albertsons on this side of the street. I absolutely see it clearly in my head. And I was always just, the sign creeped me out. And I don't know why. It was just weird. So yeah, I hope that this case was interesting to you.
It was very interesting.
Because it was to me.
Yeah.
This case took me a week to compile. Because
there's a lot of back and forth.
There's a lot.
And she popped up a lot.
She did.
But I like how you did it where you started out in 1985 and then jumped to 1997, and eventually you filled the gap in between.
Well, and I can't take the credit. Like I said, that was Texas Monthly.
Okay.
I reported it exactly as they did.
That's a good magazine.
It really is. And I read this over and over and over again. And it took me a good week to get all my notes together on this, just because it was just bananas.
Yeah.
How everything went. But
cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. How much this, she went everywhere.
Yeah.
Altoona,
and I wanted to cover it literally because I did want to get on my soapbox for just a minute about the state of mental health in this country, and that I think we really seriously need to reform.
And I'm glad we mentioned victim shaming too, because I feel like the sisters as adults could have said something, but again, I wasn't in that situation. I don't know.
Right.
It just seemed like of the three of them, one of them could have stepped forward and said, I know what's really going on. And eventually they did, but it was 10 years too late.
But it might have taken just that, the extreme case that Treva got to. It might have taken that for them to finally say, I can't stay in silence anymore. I have to say something.
Anything. Yeah.
It could have been. So, again, not being in their situation, I can't say a whole lot about it. So thank you for taking that ride with me.
Sure. That was actually a pretty interesting ride. I feel for Treva.
Yeah, I do too.
Or I'm sorry, she doesn't. She prefers not to be called Treva.
Brianna.
She prefers to be called Brianna.
Yeah, I looked around trying to find anything about her past 2016 and
nothing. She's probably she could be on the street in Fort Worth for all we know.
She could be. She unfortunately she might be dead too.
Yeah.
So I'm from time to time I'm going to look to see if there's any new information on her, and I'll bring it up here if I find anything.
Okay.
Because I really would love to know that somebody finally went, hey, come with me. We're going to get you some help.
Yeah.
Versus, again, I don't want to victim shame, but Suzanne Arnold, who said, here's a quarter, please call somebody.
She was a social worker.
I know. Yeah,
she's a social worker.
She's a social worker, but Treva was an adult. She couldn't force her to go anywhere. I just think there's something more she could have done. I think so. Something.
I don't care how busy she is. She knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. And I've talked. So I've talked with Keith's wife Barbara briefly, and
Love you, Barbie.
And I didn't get her for this episode, but I told her at some point, because she's a social worker. Yes. And I told her at some point I would love to get the social worker point of view on why people's noodles crack like this. Mm-hmm. And I hope she's a listener, because after this episode, I would love to hear from her and hear her take on this. And
Barbie, give us a take. Give us a take. Even if it's a private message, give us a take.
Yeah, and for exactly what you're saying, she's a social worker. She could have done something. I'd like to know, because Barbara may have a completely different point of that.
She may be like, she couldn't do anything.
Right. She may absolutely say it.
Yeah, if she would have done something, she would have gone to jail, that kind of thing. We don't know.
Well, or I don't say necessarily jail, but that she just could. Who knows? So I'll be very interested if she can give us her take from the social worker aspect, what she could have done. Because again, I'm not victim shaming. I'm not going to, and I hate to say that Suzanne Arnold was wrong, but at the same time, I really think something more than here's a quarter, please call someone for help. Yeah. I think there's more that could have been done. Yeah. So, so thank you.
Sure.
That takes us.
Hey, nobody died.
Nobody died on this one, right? That does take us to the end of this week. I would like to point out next week for episode 22 is our Halloween episode. It comes out on
spooky.
Halloween. We will have a very special Halloween episode for next week. So I'm very, very excited about that. Excited about our stories. As always, you can find us on our website, nerderyandmurdery.com.
Yes, please.
That's where all of our contact information is, where you can let us know how you think we're doing. Mm-hmm. Give us ideas of stories you would like us to cover, the nerdery or the murdery side.
Please. Always looking for material.
Absolutely. You can find links to all of our social media, as well as our Patreon, where if you wish to support our show, help keep us going, please do visit our Patreon.
Please and thank you.
For that, we will be down the road probably adding more into there. We might add some special stuff for our merch, which our merch is going to be coming soon.
Yes. We're wearing template t-shirts today.
Template t-shirts. So our merch will be coming soon, and we may do something special for patrons on that, as well as a potential blooper reel down the road. Yes. So definitely make sure to check it out. You can see pictures of us there, links to all of our episodes, as well as our blog. With that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.